Hello there. I hope Aurelia is with us already. Let's see if we have the connection.
Hello, good morning. Good
Hello.
day.
I can't see you yet, but hopefully in a moment I should be able to. The studio is working on it now. Hi, how are...
All right.
Oh, I was going to ask, how are you?
I'm I'm well. I had surgery yesterday, as you can see, but committed to being here. So thank goodness for painkillers, I would say.
Oh, I'm going to be really gentle then. We're
No
going to talk
worries.
about something really important, sense of belonging. Sounds like a generic concept to many, but we can clearly say that it can be low or it can be high. So to start with, what is sense of belonging to you from your perspective? What's the way you think about it?
Sure. I'll start with a little anecdote. So when I joined Cisco, it was almost 14 years ago now, as a customer experience TAC manager, leading teams of engineers. I have to be honest. I was joining a team of managers based in Belgium, and then in 2010, it consisted of 3 female managers out of about 22 total. So it was a 87% male majority then. At the moment I was hired, I was a working mom. I had a son who was 3 years old and was actually considering going for a second child, which I did have 2 years later. While most of my male peers, they had stay at home wives or partners in roles such as teachers or educators, which facilitated the whole child, drop off, pick off, school schedules, holiday planning, etc. So at the beginning, I was quite worried. I was asking myself, what am I doing here? How am I going to manage this? I won't be able to keep up. And do I even belong here? Right? That was the question I had. And yet, the support, understanding, and flexibility that I experienced throughout as I started and continued with my career at Cisco was really second to none. I was also encouraged. I actually launched our Women of Cisco ERO chapter, and I was able to start coaching, mentoring, and hiring more women and diverse managers year after year as we saw the diversity metrics improve across the organization.
Mhm.
The flexibility also allowed me, to grow, changing roles every few years, and I felt at home. So at that point onwards, I realized I do belong, and not only that, but I want to make sure and make it's my goal to make sure that everyone at Cisco feels like they belong. So to
Right.
your question, belonging, what does it mean? So as a DEI definition, I would say it's, a purposeful workplace experience that doesn't just happen, but it needs to be fostered.
Mhm.
Belonging can be, defined as, let's say, a person's perception of acceptance within a given group, whether, as well as a work environment. So
Right.
fostering belonging means, that people of all backgrounds have a seat at the table. They can feel heard, seen, and recognized for their contributions.
Mhm.
At Cisco, we have 3 main pillars in our D&I strategy, and one of them is the belonged pillar as part of our action plan, which is actually focused on driving a culture of belonging across the full spectrum of diversity to engage, build, and retain our diverse talent.
It's actually, when I think about belonging, it's such a fascinating topic in the sense that there is no way you can achieve belonging in an organization without the feeling of authenticity and enthusiasm attached, which is essentially the pleasure of waking up in the morning and going to work and looking forward to it, not thinking about it, God, another day, gloomy weather outside, lots of snow, no less.
Don't go there.
So all those factors would compile to build a negative mindset if you don't do it in the positive way. And even in the world of international conferences and events, whenever I audit an international conference, a sense of belonging of its audience is like a separate category for me. How do you create a sense of community, the tribe around an idea? It's such a fascinating art, isn't it? So perhaps to dissect it a little more and to understand what makes the sense of belonging low, or when is it low, when is it high? Can you help us understand how these two extremes differ?
Absolutely, and because I'm sort of a glass half full kind of person, I'm going to focus on, the elements of what makes
Positive.
belonging high. Yes, a high culture of belonging. So there are a few. I would say the first one would be a feeling of safety. So where employees, report feeling comfortable to be able to speak up or talk about different ideas, a diversity of approaches and encourage, and we see that innovation is high. I think that's one key. Another one is that people are on the same page, especially when it comes to understanding all the terminology, the priorities around belonging and other D&I at all levels of the company, right? Not just from the executive level, but down to our individual contributors.
Hmm?
Another point that's very important, I think, is that managers need to be fair, right? That there's no reports from people that are experiencing maybe microaggressions or ostracism from their leaders or in the workplace in general. Another one, diverse social bonds and interactions, exist are encouraged. Especially, I think it's really important for people and individuals who may not otherwise interact, right? That there's a feeling of trust and respect across departments, levels, demographics, and that there's few feelings of exclusion or isolation.
All right. If I may add something to what you've just
Absolutely.
said, thinking about this being an important criterion in any organization, I would imagine it's also possible that you have a super effective employee when it comes to KPIs, the key ways of measuring effectiveness, efficiency at work, whatever they may be in any organization. At the same time, zero sense of belonging, because for them is like someone can be
Transactional.
completely separating those two realities. So my question is, does it create concerns for whoever supervises such an employee, or is this something that we should put up with because it's normal, that's the way some people are?
Good question. I think ultimately belonging is emotionally vital for social circle, family, but as well at the workplace, right? So the strength of need can definitely vary from person to person, as your example, but there's a near universal desire for individuals to feel genuinely welcome to participate, secure in their role, and connected to their colleagues, right? So psychologically, humans have that fundamental need to be accepted in groups, and we must simply establish and maintain a good relationship in order to feel like we want to stay put in an environment, including the work one. So, to your question, it would be a concern because ultimately, people who feel like they don't belong will eventually move on. So there is the aspect of employee retention there and engagement.
What if they don't? If they simply like the actual work, just like Basha put it, transaction, they like the experience, but still, maybe they just want to stay in a particular company. Is this also possible, you think?
I suppose it's possible they would stay, but will they thrive? I think to the previous session that you have, it depends. I know that was a theme
The
in the
most
previous
fashionable
session.
term of the conference.
Exactly, absolutely. So I would say it depends. For sure, the person could stay, but will they thrive? That's another point.
Maybe I should throw in a question from our audience.
And the words of encouragement.
And the words of encouragement. Aurelia, your story is beautiful, and a smiley. Thanks for your determination to be with us. Would you share with us concrete tips? How are we helping LGBTQ plus individuals at Cisco to feel belonging after your personal experience?
Sure. I think I can address that. I think this is where employee resource groups, we call them inclusive communities, at Cisco or at any organization are very beneficial, right? So inclusive communities is definitely a way to foster belonging, to create that safe space, and to make sure that for all our different underrepresented communities, it's not just an HR thing, that we have conscious efforts to improve the belonging and that it's visible. So whether it's encouraging, people to join our Pride ERO or allies as well. We sponsor a lot of different Pride events across the globe, as well as giving a spotlight for people to share their experience and tell their story as well. I think storytelling is very powerful, and I think we do that well within Cisco too. So there are multiple ways I think that we can. A lot of it comes from our wonderful inclusive communities that drives those, but as well incorporating those with For example, our leadership teams, bringing those stories into our all hands, all employee meetings, etc.
So I think we've covered the positive aspects and what a sense of belonging gives to you as an employee and the organization you work for. But what about challenges? And obviously those happen, those occur in any organization. So if you have those challenges, what would be your favorite tools of addressing those, Aurelia?
So I think some of the challenges that we've seen, obviously post-pandemic, right, is the whole move to remote or hybrid work environments, and how that's changed with a lot of people, working more from home or remotely, and not having those connections that we had one-on-one or in the office or with team meetings, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
obviously that's become a challenge that we're navigating through these last few years.
It's actually
And
quite funny, I mean, quite ironic also, you mentioned that. Only yesterday I said in one of the interviews that 3 years ago it was extravagant to work remotely, and now it's extravagant to work in the office, I suppose. So that shift has been kind of significant.
Extreme.
And on a mental level, extracting everyone from the community of your colleagues at work to a rather lonely, maybe comfortable, maybe you're able to adjust it and adapt mentally, but still rather secluded environment of your home, working from home. I think it creates a bit of a reality distortion field for you. Time flies like, I don't know, for many people, the last 3 years are like really strange. The sense of time passing is different. So back to those challenges, your favorite tools, Aurelia. How do you go about those?
So, sure. I would say, obviously, continuing to encourage those interactions and social bonding, virtual team building activities, hybrid giving back. We just announced in our Cisco Purpose Report, last fiscal year, so again, post-pandemic, we had 85% of our employees participate in driving community impact. And a lot of those were virtual, right? Because people weren't getting together in the office to go to a food bank, for example, like we were doing in the past together. So a lot of those, we came up with different innovative ways to give back to the community virtually, or also offering the people opportunities to do it within their own local region too, whether it was their children's school or an NGO nearby. So I think people having the options and flexibility to make an impact and that sense of purpose and belonging is very important.
Right.
Another one I would say, something that we started during the pandemic at Cisco with our executive leadership team. So we saw our CEO, Chuck Robbins, introduce regular weekly check-ins for our 80,000 plus employees worldwide from the homes of our leadership team. And basically they were there to answer any questions that employees might have, and not just from a business perspective, but from a personal, to your point before, well-being discussion is too, bringing in experts, et cetera. And I think these authentic discussions were really centered around Cisco's ethos of, one's family, health, and home life come before work.
Right.
And these were so successful that we continue them today. We call them the Cisco Beat. And I think, Cisco employees and myself, we feel proud to work, for a company that really cares in that way. So I think that's more around the whole, hybrid and remote point of bringing folks together. And
if I can comment on that, what I'm hearing from you is an example of how powerful this role modeling is, especially if it's done at the executive level, but also in this different virtual setup, how important it is, that sometimes can also be a challenge to people, how important it is to become accountable, to be the trigger for your social life or, social moments versus you
become a hermit.
Yes, like, like today we met in the office, you offered me coffee. If I'm sitting at home, I need to be the trigger. Like if I want to make a call or if I want to do the virtual coffee, I think people need to shift that mindset and take more responsibility on them.
What Basia has just said, I think this is something I could also share, I suppose. I was very deliberate when I left a hyper-intensive corporate life, lots of business trips, business dinners, lots and lots of meetings, like 16 hours a day every week. And after that, I knew you couldn't simply go to a freelance job, like straight to a freelance job. I didn't want to go to another equally dynamic corporate context at that point. So I thought, why not go to a private university where you have daily contact with students? At the same time, you don't have too much work, so you really have time to think who you want to be, what you want to do with your life, how you want to proceed from that step onwards. And I can tell you that this was really a major change maker for me, this simple decision to create enough mental space, not to become this hermit or someone who suffers from, overdose of stimuli and is suddenly thrown into a world where you have none or next to none.
Very different dynamics.
Yeah.
Very different
so in that sense, the pandemic was like this massive force that took all of us, whether we liked it or not, from the world of, hyper-community-driven, overstimulated environment, or stimulate properly, enthusiastic daily exposure to people, to one where you're lonely. And you didn't choose it. That's what the pandemic made you do, essentially. So the question coming from our audience is, one, in the spirit of perhaps a little bit of skepticism, how do you measure the success of initiatives aimed at nurturing a sense of belonging within your organization? Because you did mention, Aurelia, that you have some virtual team building initiatives. For some people, the success of those is a contradiction in terms. They're undoable. So, in the sense that virtually team building is just so much more difficult to make it authentic and real and feel real and make people really enjoy it. Right?
And
so it's an art.
And it's such an individual thing to, the sense of belonging. It may mean different things to different people, feeling, but also in a way how it's expressed. So I think it's a huge challenge.
Yeah, and lots
how
of
to measure
traps.
it.
Lots of traps, because people may feel it really feels artificial. It feels superficial. It feels strange. There's something wrong with it. There's something unnatural about it.
And
not only because it's the screens and cameras.
Yes.
We're not seeing, talking to each other, watching each other's body language, right? Interpreting it subconsciously, so to say. So how do you go about measuring the success of those initiatives? Like literally measuring?
Yeah, and I think it's all initiatives that are around, right, belonging and employee engagement, right? For sure, surveys, many companies leverage surveys to see if the needle is moving in the right direction. I would like to share a method that we have at Cisco called inclusive community roundtables. And basically these are, let's say, open, candid, in-person or virtual, again, because we need to ensure fairness for any type of hybrid work, in a safe space with our senior leaders who get together with our diverse talent, where employees are then encouraged to speak freely and be listened to. We run these a couple a quarter, I would say. They're moderated by our HR professionals, and it's really giving the folks an opportunity to listen and hear about the experiences of our underrepresented groups, whether it's their experience in the workplace, in their teams, or in society overall. And I think what's really important is the participants are asked to self-nominate, right? So they're truly there because they want to be there. They're not mandated to be there. And we're really ensuring that they're genuinely there to share and be heard. And I can tell you that the feedback that we've gotten in these roundtables and listening to them, we've taken that feedback and we've leveraged it and we've put it into our D&I strategy and action plan fiscal year over fiscal year.
Right.
So it's, surveys I think are a great tool, but truly sitting down and listening and letting them be heard is a very strong tool, I think.
I'm sure we couldn't agree more with you. Aurelia, we've run out of time, but this last question coming from the audience is really so tempting that I simply cannot resist. It's really interesting. Individuals with a low sense of belonging will stay in an organization if they value higher other factors. And they can even thrive in such an organization. So the question is, if it really doesn't strengthen the spoiled organizational culture even more. Do you see the point? Should I paraphrase and repeat it again? So the question is, some people have a low sense of belonging, will be staying in the organization nevertheless because they value, what is more important for them is other factors. And they can even thrive in such organizations. But the question is, if that's happening, doesn't it strengthen the spoiled organization culture even more?
No, not necessarily. I mean, to me, I think, like I said, if you feel like you belong, everyone, like as we mentioned, has different aspects of what they value, right? And I think organizations, we have, multiple priorities that we follow and that we have at Cisco. Again, long term, I do believe that there's something that will make that person feel like they belong if they're staying deep down, right? So whether it's whatever it may be, if the person decides to stay, there's some value or purpose of the company that keeps that person there.
Right.
So maybe that is their definition of belonging, right?
Yes, but what this question made me think of, Basia, Aurelia, is you may have read the biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson, the long-time editor of Time magazine, and he makes frequent references to the company's A-player culture and tolerance for only the best performance,
Excellence.
and creating this hyper-toxic culture where people may not necessarily care that much about the culture itself, but more about being part of the identity of one of the strongest brands on the planet. So in that spirit, I think that question comes, that sometimes the dominance of those hyper-effective types is such that they have a negative impact, potentially, on how considerate, how empathetic the culture of the organization itself is, right?
I think it's a
maybe not.
I think it's a very complex question, and it's a question about the purpose of the organization, but also a question of how big how big risk this group creates, because
Exactly.
they may feel it, but they may not even be expressed, and that's fine, at least to me. So,
and there are fascinating studies and research studies around this topic. The influence of a, say, single personality on the organization itself.
Before we cut off, I want.
Cut off is such an aggressive metaphor.
Yes,
Come
we
on.
just got a message that we need to finish up. But I think we really want to thank you, Aurelia, for being with us. I just keep looking at your hand and thinking, are you really okay?
Yeah, I was thinking, because you said you're the glass half full person, and with the right painkillers, everyone is a glass half full person.
Yes,
That's true.
so thank you so much.
Even without them, but thank you. My pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and all the
Thanks a lot.
best.
Aurelia, one
Wish you lots
final
of luck.
thing.
Thank you.
One final thing. I'm sure I mispronounced your name at the very beginning. Can you give us the proper pronunciation for everyone to remember, please?
Aurelia Takacs.
Thank you so much, Aurelia. It's been a pleasure. All the best.
Stay
Excellent. Thank you. All the
in good
best.
health, and all the best to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we are back.